Hey guys, so this is our day 4 of 365 days coding. So today the problem with which is in front of us is this odd number problem where we need to print first 5 odd numbers, that is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay, and these 5 odd numbers should be separated by space. So let's write it down. Okay, so we will remember this. So we need to print 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay, or we can say first 5 odd numbers, and then these odd numbers should be space separated. Okay, so these two things we identified with this problem statement. Now what will be our approach to solve this? Okay, so what we can do is we can first initialize a variable. Okay, so we can say initialize a variable, let's call it count, and let's initialize it to 0 for now. Okay, after that what we can do is we can do another thing. We can initialize another variable, let's call it number, and initialize it to 1. Now let's define this. So what this count will do, it basically drag the number counts. Okay, so it will track whether we have reached till the 5 numbers or not. Okay, and then we have initialize another variable number which is 1. Okay, this is track our actual numbers. Okay, now thirdly what we can do, we can use a loop. Okay, and this loop can be a while loop or a for loop, anything is fine. And then fourthly what we need to do, we need to check if the number is odd or not. Okay, and if the number is odd, so what we will do, if number is odd, in that scenario we will say print that number. And if the number is not odd, okay, we will print that number. And if the number is not odd, means it's a even number, so we will do nothing. And finally what we will do, we can say we need to increment, because if number is checked, then we need to increment the count, right? Increment the count by 1. And 7th step, we can say we will increment the number, because if it is checked, then we need to increment it, right? Increment by 1. Okay, so this will be our approach. Now let's try to write a code, and so you will get a better understanding. So first of all, what we need to do, we need to initialize a variable count to 0. Second, we will initialize a number to 1. Now we will use a loop, let's call it a while loop for now, and we can say count if count is less than 5. So currently our count is 0, so it's definitely less than 5. So what we will do, we will check if if our number modulo 2 is not equal to 0. Okay, so see, if a number means we are dividing the number by 2 and checking if we are getting remainder as 0 or not. So if remainder is 0, this means that that's a even number, but if remainder is not equal to 0, this means that that's a odd number. That's why we wrote this condition. And what we wrote here, if the number is odd, then what we need to do, we need to print that number. So we will say print print that number. And here we said that those numbers should be space separated, right? So we can say end equals to this. So the number becomes space separate. Now what we need to do? We need to increment the count by 1. Okay, because one number is checked, so the count will be increment by 1. So plus equals to 1. And finally we can increment the number by 1. Okay, so we will say number plus equals to 1. This is done. So let's try to run and see if we are getting the expected result. So see, we are getting 13579 and this is what expected, right? So we get the answer, correct answer. Now there is one problem with this approach, that is we are first using a while loop and then we are checking the number is odd or not. Okay, so is there any other way we can do this? Okay, so yes, we can do this is by another approach, that we can say, see, we have given the number 1, right? So if I add 2 to it, it will become 3, which is odd number. If I add 1 again 2 to it, it will become 5, which is again an odd number. If I add 2 to this 5, it will become 7. If I add 2, it will become 9. So we are getting odd number that way, and we are skipping one step, that is checking, right? So let's write a approach for this. So what we can do, so we need to initialize a variable and let's call it number, and let's call it initialize to 1. Now secondly, what we will do, we will use a loop. Okay, same step, we initialize 2 variable here, but here we will use only one initialization. Okay, and why we did 2? Because we are using while loop, but this time we will try to solve it using for loop, so this will eliminate the need of one variable, right? Then we will use a for loop, and instead of checking that number, we will first print that number and then we will increment that count. So we will say use a loop, and then what we will do, we will print the number, and in the fourth step what we will do, increment number by 1. Okay, so this is our approach. So let's code it. So first what we need to do, define a number which is equals to 1, then use a loop. Let's use a for loop, and we will say I in range. What is our range? So range is 5. We need to print 5 numbers, and then instead of then what we need to do, we need to print that number, right? So we will say print, and we will say number, and then it will end with a space. Okay, and finally what we need to do, we need to say number, and we need to increment it by 2. Okay, let's see. So we get 13579, which is the same output as above. Okay, so this way we have solved this problem, and let me kind of give you a revision. What we have to do, we need to print first 5 odd numbers, 13579. We need to print them by space separated. What we did initially, we initialize a variable count, then we initialize a number 1 to 1, means a number to 1. Then we use a while loop. We check if the value of count is less than 5. If it is less than 5, we enter the loop and check if our number is odd. If it is odd, then print this number, increment the count, increment the number, and then keep on doing until we printed 5 numbers. So these are exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. And in this approach, we saw that we are using this if condition, which is not required, not necessary. So in our approach 2, we basically improve that. So we initialize the number, we use for loop, and we gave a range to 5. Now we print the number by space, and then we increment the number by 2. So this way we again get the odd numbers space separated. So when this is all for this video. If you like the way of solving this problem, then you can consider subscribing subscribing the channel, and let's meet in another video.